Warning. This will be talking about topics that might trigger you. Be aware before continuing on watching and listening to this episode. Thank you.
Hi, welcome back. We have Dr. Kelly Everson finishing up our final chapter before it's been a long day for her. So we're very excited, and we're going to expand our final chapter into two segments. It's going to be one that goes across the board from children, problems that I've noticed with the generation coming up. And then our first letter of our podcast that was actually I guess got through our marketing department, but actually wrote a personal letter and questionnaire that we're encouraging everybody now to do so we can improve our content, that she addressed it to Dr. Kelly Everson. So very exciting. And she's from New York. So Dr. Everson, so your name is traveling fast. So we're very excited. First one we'll start is, this is, I guess, a question I created based on, it's frustrating because I'll give you my relation to it is that I was, I'm class A dyslexic. So as a young kid, and we talked about ADD or stuff like that. As a young child, I was, the only reason I went to school really was because of sports. So if I didn't go to school and go to practice, I couldn't play in the game on Friday night, so that was my drive. So, and if I didn't pass, get my grades right, I couldn't play. So my father worked two jobs, was a coach and a professor at a junior college, a very hardworking family. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, which is underrated because her job, especially pretty much raising me as a young kid, I was a handful. So she was set aside to helping me get through my homework. And whenever I got in trouble in school, she was the one called up and sitting, if I had to do an assignment, I would constantly sit there and be like, Paolo, do this math problem while she's in the kitchen. And I would kick the pencil off the table, distract her, and almost wore the poor woman out, And so I was constantly trying to be distracted. So I guess they didn't have the psychology and the tools and the science that you're bringing out and sharing with us today. But I did never have a problem with communicating. My father raised me at an early age. If he introduced me to one of his fellow colleagues, I would look the gentleman or the lady in the eye, and I would say, hi, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, and shake their hand, hold the door open for a woman or an older person, common courtesy skills, like old-fashioned. We call it a little bit, that's lost in our generation coming up now. And then also to the technology, which has helped me a lot since I'm almost going back to med school, being prepared for our not-for-profit, not to speak as a professional like you do and have the skills, but to just get a basic understanding so I could ask the proper questions. And this goes across the boards from junior high kids or high school or even top Ivy League school kids. They're amazing at writing papers. If I call and say, listen, I'm going blind in my right eye, I'm here to mentor you. I'm here if you're having any anxiety issues, your problems with an assignment, give me a call. And their communication skills, they're still in school. So I'm telling them that they have to learn how to, public speaking, and if their only job is, I don't know any of the kids, and I had my 5 businesses for about 30 years, and one of them was sports performances. I grew up middle class, wasn't poor, wasn't rich, but never needed anything because my father always provided well. But if I ever needed anything, a baseball glove or anything, of course, my dad would be there to support me. But he instilled, growing up out of New York, was like, it's snowing, grab your shovel and go shovel the driveways and earn $10, mow the lawn. And I started my first business, believe it or not, at age 11. selling sodas and water and candy on the beaches in New York and Long Island. And I was an entrepreneur at that age, and it gave me, salesmanship, so many life skills that I used. And the kids do not. I got kids that are brilliant on the book side and the learning all the educational stuff. But when it comes to real life skills, and that's what we're trying to develop with our apprentice program, is that they're so lacking, is that they can't fix a problem in their own head unless it's actually in a textbook or in a test. So, and they also do not communicate. And I say, well, why don't you ask me a question if you can't solve it yourself? And I tell them, I say, look, besides me having my challenges with my disease, I can't read text or go back and have a conversation with somebody with a text because it's not personal. So do you find this, and none of the kids, or very, I shouldn't say that in time, I say a very limited amount, really have a part-time job in the summertime, and maybe because they don't financially need it because they're wealthy, come from a wealthy community. I think there is something for, my first car was $400, and it was one of my favorite cars ever, It was an ugly car, but I paid for it with all the money I did. And I thought it was the coolest thing. Where my senior year, I got a scholarship to go to a really wealthy school, and everyone was pulling up in BMWs and stuff that their parents gave them. And I thought that is, now looking back at it, I thought, so, wow, how'd they get that? But then I look at it as almost the parents are doing the wrong thing, because what do they have to look forward to in the future? If you get everything at such an early age, and you didn't, there is something about feeling good about this, about putting in that a full work ethic.
Sure.
And how do we teach that coping skill, work ethic, and communication skills?
So the word that we use for this, this is what's called a behavioral plan. So one of the things, and I am of the same wavelength as you, and in terms of this, I think it is vitally important, even if kids come from a super wealthy family. And I have plenty of clients that come from very wealthy families, and I feel exactly the same way about them as anybody else. It is vitally important for somebody to understand that actions have consequences, good and bad. So if I behave a certain way and it's what's expected of me, or I work hard, good things happen. If I choose, and my language is really important here, if I make the choice to behave a certain way, so I'm saying I'm in control of my behavior by saying that. If I make the choice, I'm also making the choice to accept the consequence. And that is really important language to start using with kids, to start instilling this idea that their behavior has consequences, like no matter what. Like I said earlier in another segment, I said, most adults wouldn't go to work if they didn't get paid. On the same vein, if I speed down, around here, Military Trail, then I'm choosing to accept a speeding ticket if I'm given one. So the adult society that we want in is on a behavioral plan, right? And kids as young as 2, 3, 4, understand this concept of I behave a certain way, as young as 2 probably, that and good things happen. If I don't, not so good things happen, right? And so when you have like school age kids and then high school, middle schoolers and high schoolers who, like, just like you're talking about, what the problem is that they don't understand that if you work hard for things, then you, like, the whole idea of earning things, good things come to me when I've earned them. And the problem is that when we just give kids too many things without making them earn them, they never get that specific concept. And so then you have an adult in our world who expects things to just happen to them. And they're, and unfortunately, that's just not how our society is run. We're not in that society. And so it's really a disservice to kids. So I tell parents, no matter what, so say they come from a really wealthy family, even if you're planning to give the kid the BMW, right? The kid should still have the illusion that they're earning it in some way. And they should understand that they don't get to keep it for free, meaning like they still, all kids should contribute to the house that they live in. The parents may not, they may not be charging them rent, but they should be charging them something. They should be helping with chores. They should be contributing in some way at a certain age. If it's, if that's what the family believes, they should be getting a part-time job or whatever it should be. They should be maintaining certain grades. They should be doing chores, whatever it may be. But they have to have this concept of, I don't just get unlimited video game time. That's another one in our current generation, is this idea of like, I just have to go to school and then I can spend the rest of my time doing this. Well, no, you have to maintain certain grades. You have to do certain chores and all those things. And if you do what I'm asking you to do, then in effect, you earn, 2 hours of video game time or whatever the parent is comfortable with. But it's not just given, and that's that core concept of this behavioral plan concept. I hit on the video games, and the last thing I would talk about is, what you want to identify with a kid and an adult, frankly, is what's your currency. So what are you as a person willing to put yourself in a slightly uncomfortable position in order to get somewhere else, right? And as an adult, 99% of all of our currencies is money. That's how the world works, right? So I'm willing to go to work because I'm going to get paid. I'm willing to do, be a little bit uncomfortable, but there's a reward at the end of it, right? What is your, we have to ask, for children, adolescents, and young adults, what is their currency? It may not be money always, especially adult, people who come from the wealthy families. It's not always money necessarily, because it's always been there and they haven't had to worry about it. So it may be, for a teenager right now, it may be video games. Literally, it may be like, I'm willing to work for video games. Okay, for right now, that's your currency. So here's my list of expectations for you. And if you choose to do these things, then you are choosing to get your video games. If you choose not to, you are choosing not to have any video games today. We're not arguing. I'm not the bad guy. This is how the world works. So.
When I was doing when we had the sports performance company, like they would come in and put the work in with us, and I said, listen, this is a luxury. This isn't something, your parents, my father couldn't, well, I shouldn't say that, but I paid for my own personal training, my coach and stuff like that on the side. If I needed an academic tutor, then of course they would pick up that, because it was a different situation. But so how do we, because I have kind of like, and I had to be careful because I'm not a professional like you talking to a parent. So I had to really be careful on how I structured my words, but I would bring it up to some of the parents that I was working with, and they would be like, oh, Joe and Joe or Sally, they're straight A students. So that's all it is. And I always said, well, why, they're out on the weekend, how can they have a job or do something like that? Do you think it's important, or at what age to get some? I'm not talking about you working in a sweatshop, but I'm talking,
I mean, I do to a certain degree. It doesn't always have to be a job. So that depends on the family. Like a lot of, not necessarily all families don't believe that kids should be like actually employed. But I do feel really strongly that a child should be contributing to the home, like I said. And so however that looks, it may look different for different families. I do believe that a child should have responsibility. I think a child as young as a toddler has certain responsibilities, typically cleaning up their toys or things like cleaning up a mess,
Right.
help with that. And you start them young, you start them little, and every age after that, age appropriately, a child should have responsibilities in the home. And so whether that's that you expect, not only do I expect you to go to school and try your best, but I also expect you to clean up certain things, to maybe take out the recycling. I expect you at a certain age, we might expect them to have a volunteer position or something like that, or at a certain age in certain families, 100%. It's like, then you need to, if you want extra things, you need to go get a part-time job and start doing that. And I find that definitely, like that's like probably like the 16, 17, 18-year-olds for sure. That a lot of parents are pushing more, part-time jobs and all that kind of stuff.
Now, how do you help a kid build up if they say, all right, well, I got school until 4 or 5 o'clock, and then if they have a social club or an athletic event, they get home 7, and then they have 8 o'clock, but then they have the weekends free. How do we help them build up their endurance? So, the last thing I wanted to do was get up in the morning and shovel snow or mow a lawn on a Saturday on my day off. So how do we help motivate them or build up that endurance.
Sure. I think that goes back, part of it goes back to asking about what's their currency though, in terms of like, it's not necessarily just endurance, it's also finding their motivation because the phrase is we can do hard things, right? That's a lot of people use that phrase. We can do hard things, and teenagers especially can do anything for a certain amount of time if they're motivated for it. So what's the motivation? What's the currency? Like, what are you willing to work for a little bit? And I think tapping into that, and then you hit on a little bit, it's not only just the motivation, but it's helping them with executive functioning. So when exactly will you have time? How much time do you need to use for your homework? And how do we help structure your evening schedules on the weekdays so that you really do have your weekends free for certain things or whatever? So helping them understand like time management also I think is important, but the motivation part is like tapping into why do you want to work or why do you want to do this? If you had extra money, what are you going to buy with your extra money? So trying to tap into like kind of what's the benefit to them.
And so would that be something that they would come in and speak to you with family dynamics and you would coach the parents and give them those skills? And if they didn't have you as a resource, again, is what type of books could they learn? Is there actually like a guide to being a good parent? Is there, I see right now.
There's a million guides to being a good parent.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would personally specifically recommend any specific
Okay.
one because I take stuff from a lot of the different ones. With little kids, a lot of people use things like something called 1, 2, 3 magic, which is kind of some of the behavioral plan stuff comes from that and everything. There are definitely guides to being a parent, and there are now there's a YouTube channels and all kind, Instagram pages that that specialize in all that kind of stuff. I don't think that any of that takes away from sitting in front with a clinician or sitting with somebody who does this for a living and kind of problem solving together. I sit with parents oftentimes and actually make the behavioral plans with them because that supports it. Because I tell a parent, if a parent can't be consistent on what we're talking about, don't even try. Because a kid is going to see your inconsistencies immediately. So if like you as a parent can't do this consistently, don't waste everybody's time. Like we need it to be, we have to have it simple enough that a parent is going to do it when they're tired at the end of a day.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they end up, so basically, all right, so we have that finished. I guess we're going to Gary from New York's letter.
Sure.
All right. So, dear Dr. Everson, I'm so excited about hearing about you coming on Paolo's podcast. I work 5 days a week. I'm a single mom. I'm a single woman in her 50s on a very tight budget, and I hold everything in. I'm divorced, and I have been dating the same man for 10 years, and he has a terminal illness. So he's been trying so hard not to build walls because she knows she's going to be passing away in a couple of years, and putting walls up to protect her own emotions. At the same time, she doesn't want to lose the love she has for her partner. And
Sure.
especially with this disease going on for years, it's like a roller coaster. I can't take it anymore. The time is coming, then it's going good for a couple of weeks, preparing for the death of a loved one. Plus, I am also trying to hold together. My parents live 3 hours away and very close. They're getting older, and balancing, trying to take care of them on a limited budget and not taking care of myself. Then she says, so then she wants to know like self-care techniques and coping skills to get through this. And her partner is one day he'll have a good day. And since their, I guess, intimacy is even though it's separated, so they're not intimate anymore. And so she said she's been going through menopause for this is a bad transition, I guess, from child psychology, right? And for going in, so she's been going through menopause for the last 7 years, which affects her hormones, and
Sure.
and her son is her stepson is in jail right now, so she's got a trifecta going on, and she does everything, but she doesn't. She holds it into herself, and she doesn't reach out for help. What should she coping skills could she do on her own? Because she has a hard time talking about her feelings.
So here's the number one thing I would say. Oftentimes we use that analogy of the airplane and putting the mask, the parent putting the mask on themselves before they put the mask on their child, right? And the reason that, if anybody doesn't know the reason, obviously, is I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But if we don't put the mask on ourselves first, we pass out and then we can't help our child anyway. And that's a really good metaphor for the story that you read. Listen, you read that story, but there are millions of those stories just like that, right? And I tend to believe, and I've experienced as well, that parents will the first inclination of a parent always is to help those around us for the most part before we help ourselves. And it really speaks to that metaphor in terms of that, is that eventually we will not be able to help everyone else if we are crumbling totally. And so, she's right to write about and ask about self-care, because my number one recommendation 100% would be to do a complete reset in terms of self-care, because it sounds like, some things in her life are coming to a head a little bit. And at a certain point, honestly, she will not be able to be of any help the multiple generations that she's trying to help with, and to everything that she's trying to do in her life. She's not going to be of help to them. And so a regroup and a focus on self-care is vital, it sounds like, in that story. 100%.
Get
I
some examples of self-care for that, I guess, for these
yeah.
points.
Yeah. I would say, so first of all, I would say, so here's the thing as a parent, because you're still always like looking at everybody else, like you're still making sure, like, is everybody else going to be okay? So she needs to make sure that immediate needs are met for those people that she loves. And then after that, she's going to have, and she needs going to plan, she's going to have to plan it out in terms of timing and when she does it and everything, but she's going to have to take some time for herself and totally regroup. I would recommend that she sits down and she probably writes down, like, here's my priorities, here's where I see myself, now, here's where I see myself in 10 years. What does that look like? What are some action steps to getting there? It sounds like she probably needs a little bit more in terms of help, in terms of some direction in terms of where she's going next. And that would probably help with the self-care piece, because then you can start setting goals for those things as well. But also, I would say, with all that stress, self-care is the physical self-care as well. Like someone like this needs to make sure that they are, above all else, they must, like, ideally they're taking care of their body. Menopause throws a wrench into everything for women, of course, and hormones are hormones, and it's totally crazy. But if at all possible, like, she needs to make sure that she's then getting some form of exercise or movement, so that she's keeping her mind as healthy as possible, that she's using she's using the coping skills, that she's, first of all, that she's developing coping skills. So she needs to sit down probably and make herself a coping skill list and actually think about, what do I do to de-stress? Are there ones that are healthy for me, and are there ones that are not healthy for me, and find out which ones those are. And then she probably needs to make sure that physically, someone like this that has that much stress, she also needs to make sure that she's doing things like going for her annual physical and stuff like that as well, taking care of the physical body, because when our body shuts down, the mind's not far after that, if that happens first. And so she needs to take care of her physical body as well, as a huge part of self-care. But honestly, this definitely relates to everything we're talking about, because at 100%, this is coping skills. This is what this is. And she needs to sit down and really focus, whether that's with a therapist, or whether that's, on her own, or whether that's with a loved one or somebody who supports her. She needs to sit down and kind of talk about coping skills and all that really are like her coping skills, that are not related to her partner, and that are not related to, her kids, or like anything else. Because I think, above all else, in these kind of situations, this happens in my office sometimes. I have parents come in who are there for their kids technically, but then they start telling their story, and there's a lot going on, and we have to say, listen, you are not of great help to your kids right now if you are not good for yourself. That's like the number one priority here.
Yeah, and she mentions that, she says she makes about $60,000 a year, but she works 12 hours. She gets up at 5 in the morning and doesn't get done work until 8 at night after walking the dogs and taking care of her partner. And then I guess is trying to keep their love and connection, not feel like a parasite, but then he wants intimacy as a man and a woman where they had when they first were dating, and she feels guilty because I guess she doesn't say she's not attracted to him, but she says that she feels more as a nurse than wants to be a lover.
Sure.
So how does
One of the things I would say to address that piece of it, and somebody that I've found super helpful, and you can look him up on YouTube, but his books are amazing, is Gary Chapman, who wrote The 5 Love Languages. And it's a very well-known book in our country. And it actually talks about how people give and how people receive love. And sometimes, we're not speaking the same language as our partner, basically, and how we can easily make some changes to those things. And it can drastically improve relationships. I've used it clinically multiple times with success. And he's a fantastic speaker. So he's on YouTube as well. Chapman, Chapman, but she could look him up as well. His books are available on everywhere that books are sold at this point, I'm sure, but in the library as well.
How important, it sounds like she's going through so much, is it maybe it's guilt from her partner, but again, I can't read into this. This is your area, but is intimacy very important in a relationship?
It totally depends on the relationship, like I said, and that's where those love languages and things come in, because physical love is only one part of love in a relationship. And so it depends on how her partner receives love and how she receives love. So it sounds like from the way that she's talking about it, her love language is not physical intimacy. His may be. And so what happens is that he expects physical intimacy from her because that's his love language and that's what he wants, but that's not what she wants. And so they're speaking kind of like two different languages, and she's maybe doing like what's called acts of service. She's taking care of him or walking the dogs or whatever she's doing. So she's saying, I love you because I'm taking care of you. And he's saying, but that's not how I receive love. And so you have to kind of look at, how does each partner receive love and how do they give love? And we want to match that up if possible. I highly recommend his reading and like the books and stuff, though. They're great.
And that's 5 love languages.
The 5 love languages. Yeah. If you Google it, his books are sold everywhere. And there's tons of videos of him talking about it online as well.
And then her final question was, another fear I have and gives me great anxiety is, what if something happens to me? How will she support both of them? And
Sure.
that's, I mean, as a macho man, I don't see that as being her problem, right? I mean, I can't say you're grounded, right?
Right. Emotionally, she feels like that's her problem, though, and that's the dynamic that they're in, I think. I mean, first of all, I think, from an emotional perspective, I think she needs to, she's got to do the self-care. She's got to keep herself healthy then, if that's the case. Like, that's the number one thing she can do. And then, from an outsider's perspective, then putting in some things in place, some plans in place to say, if something happens to me, here's who you reach out to. Here's what happens with this. Here's the insurance policy that I have, whatever it may be, but like actually like physically making plans for some of that. But the number one thing emotionally is her keeping herself healthy.
And how much do you recommend? Is there a rule that, like do you take, I mean, you have so much on your plate with your practice, your baby, and your family. Do you set certain times to take care of Dr. Everson? So do you say, okay, this is my time?
Yeah, I think it's really important. So not only, we can't talk about stuff then preach stuff if we don't, do it to some degree. And I think different times in my career and different times I've been better at it than others, for sure. But that's normal. That's for all people. But 100% people, we should be modeling as best possible that we can, doing that. And part of that is setting some boundaries with that. So, I typically, so I'll make phone calls at certain times, or, if people email me, and I'm not just kind of laying there and willing to, able to do it, there are certain times, boundaries that are set. So then that I'll answer that email tomorrow because I'm busy or I'm with my family or, or whatever it is. So I think, clinicians, but people in general, we need some boundaries with some of this, right? Like how much do we work and how much do we play and how much do we spend time with people we love? Because at a certain point, why are we working so hard if we're not using some self-care and spending some time with those people as well? So boundaries are paramount.
And then I didn't address our son's in jail for 27 years. Now he's 20 something years old, and he just got admitted, and she feels like she's on a tight budget, but he needs commissary money. But she's on such a tight budget, and she doesn't get. This is her stepson. She feels guilty of not having enough money to help him. And how do I do it so I'm not enabling, but I'm doing the right thing as a loved one? So
in all honesty, I would go back, I would kind of end with, put your oxygen mask on before you put somebody else's on. If she is not in a place to help them right now, she is of best use to her family, especially in a long-term situation, if she's healthy. So if she is not in a place where she can help, in a healthy way, help other people, she needs to focus on herself first.
Okay. And do you recommend, because I had, when I was working in some of the underserved communities, do you have ever worked with parents that kids have went to jail or that situation?
Yeah. And through our work at NAMI, that's a regular situation that we handle and deal with.
Do you recommend that instead of communicating, because I didn't know they charge for the phone calls. They charge like $15 for a phone call they have to call collect the inmate. That's to call the parents. I didn't know that. Do you recommend instead of making like 3 calls a week, write letters, and does that help the inmate?
Listen, I think that journaling and writing letters is helpful for most people.
On both sides, right?
Yeah. So I think probably if that's a better route and it's better for them like financially and stuff too, absolutely. Because, when you're journaling, you actually are sitting down with a different amount of time and you're like writing, you're giving it different thought process than when we're just impulsively saying things as well. So absolutely.
Could that be a coping skill and relieve anxiety for her?
Journaling is on our coping skill list normally. Writing, a lot of forms of like artistic behavior is always on coping skill lists. So absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So in summary there, so it's basically Dr. Everson said, self-care, use the analogy, put the mask on first, take care of yourself first, right? Yeah. And then take care of your family members, yep. Right? Yep. And then for anxiety, she can use the coping skills we're giving the kids, the deep breathing, right? Exercises. Yep. And then your son, maybe use journaling is really good, writing letters, and read this book on 5 love languages.
Yes.
That's great. All right. Well, that you shared more than enough time with me. Thank you, and the community out there. Thanks you. And do you believe, are you on the same page with we're going out on our campaign that mental health and mental illness is a national health crisis? Would you say that?
Oh, yes, it's a public health crisis. Absolutely.
Okay, great. If someone's out of Florida State, but since we are doing Zoom now, no one really can come in. Do you see patients from out of Florida?
Different states have different reciprocity rules in terms of licensure and stuff like that. So you really have to wait to look into that before we can do that for sure, because certain states, especially during the COVID crisis, are allowing that and other states are not when you have patients living in other states. So it's just something kind of on a case-by-case basis that we have to look into.
So if someone's watching this podcast now, is very intrigued and connected with you or want to reach out to you and you said, I'm not really the good fit, one of my other practitioners is a better fit because that's more the specialty. And like this woman right here, maybe you would refer to somebody else in your practice.
Yes.
And I think we have it on our website. It's getting posted Do they email you? Do they call your office, or what's
Yeah, if they
the
call, our website as well has lots of information, but they can call our office and they speak to our practice manager, who's amazing, and she can kind of discern what clinician is the best fit, in terms of
Since
what.
this is going to be on different podcast platforms, so it's on YouTube and it's on a whole bunch of this. So some people can watch this visually, but they're also going to be hearing it like when they're in the car and listening to it. So what is the phone number that they could reach out to and leave the area code? And what is your executive assistant or office manager?
Sure.
Do they ask for and say that we heard?
So the practice is Palm Beach Behavioral Health and Wellness. The phone number is area code 561-429-2397. Our practice manager, who's absolutely amazing to talk to, is named Pam. She'll take your call. And then our website also has lots of information, and that's www.pbbhw.com. So the acronym for Palm Beach Behavioral Health and Wellness.
Outrageous. And they don't, and then everything's done. They wouldn't email the questions or with their problems. They speak to your coordinator.
They would speak to Pam. Yeah, they would speak to Pam and kind of get scheduled and stuff, and they'll actually be scheduled for an intake with a clinician.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, doctor. This is a real pleasure. And I hope we can build on this relationship and help more people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great week.
You too. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the concluding segment, Part 4 with Dr. Everson. Make sure to tune in next week, January 13th, for the beginning of a new segment series with former CIA agent Dr. Bourne. As of 2021, CPMHA has launched a new charity GoFundMe, and we strongly encourage all viewers to consider donating. Please consider helping us reach our campaign goals, as all proceeds go towards funding our company and into forming our programs and operations to give those in need access to free resources for coping skills and connections to get them through this national health crisis. The charity GoFundMe link will be posted in the description of all future streaming platform videos. Thank you, and don't forget to check out our company website, cpmha.com. And remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell in order to receive notifications each time we post a new podcast.